Hey guys, in this video I'll be going over the top 3 competitors of each decade. This is going to definitely be a less serious, more subjective type of video, so please let me know in the comments your top 3 for each decade. Now, as many of you know, I'm a huge fan of bodybuilding, and I saw that one of you recommended something along the lines of this video idea, so I thought that it would be a really fun video to make. I'll try my best to articulate why I chose each competitor for each decade, and also keep in mind that I'm going to start from the 1960s onwards. What decade is your favorite for bodybuilding? Let me know in the comments down below, and let's get into this video. Starting off with the 60s, we have a whole host of influential bodybuilding legends who really started to bring freakish physiques to the stage. Dave Draper is someone that comes to my mind, who is also one of my favorite competitors from this decade, not only, embodying that golden era look with his wide rib cage, massive arms, and old school proportions, but also he had one of the most easily recognizable hairstyles of his time. Tons of mass for his time as well, that classic, old school look, and great posing to match. While he never won the Olympia, he's one of my favorites, like I said, and I'm sure many of you can agree. Someone who did win an Olympia title, the first one to be exact, is Larry Scott, who had some of the craziest arms for his time. Similar to Dave, he had a very golden era structure and build, with classical proportions and an all-around very eye-pleasing physique. Now, in my opinion, the most impressive bodybuilder from this decade has got to be none other than Sergio Oliva, the 3-times Olympia winner. While his career did continue well into the 70s and even the 80s, he won the Olympia in 68 and 69, along with the Mr. Universe in 67, and of course he would win the Mr. Olympia later on as well one more time. Now, he is even in the conversation for the best genetics of all time, which is very impressive considering how little training, diet, and anabolic expertise was available. Certainly the best of the 60s, and many regard him as being one of the best to ever do it as well. The 70s saw the rise of some very notable champions along with many famous competitors. While I could probably make a top 10 for each of these decades, I'm going to have to limit myself due to the time constraints of this video. With that in mind, though, I feel as though Frank Zayn needs a mention here, as he was a staple throughout the mid-70s and of course won the Olympia in 77, 78, and 79. Although the rest of the competition only seemed to increase in muscle mass as time went on, Zayn stayed true to the classic bodybuilding spirit, presenting clean lines, beautiful proportions, and phenomenal condition. Then, of course, you have a guy like Franco Columbo, who is nearly as successful as Zayn during this time, winning the Olympia in 76 and, of course, in 81. While he might not be as famous as others who could be mentioned on this list, I think he brought that density, condition, and mass that nobody really had, especially in the back. Lastly is quite possibly the most legendary bodybuilder of all time, being Arnold Schwarzenegger. He really needs no introduction since he easily has one of the most desired physiques in the history of humanity. Massive structure, huge arms, the best chest ever, and incredible development and separation for his era. Some honorable mentions to this time period could be Serge Nubret, Lou Ferrigno, Robbie Robinson, Mike Menser, and many others, so do let me know who you would have here as well. The 80s were somewhat of a continuation of the 70s, but with even more improvements being made in condition and muscle development. Now, Bob Paris best embodies this statement, as although he never placed extremely well at the Olympia, whether it's due to politics or other things, he perfectly bridged the gap between the two decades. He combined the aesthetics of Frank Zayn with more modern levels of mass and condition, and he really drew attention to his physique whenever he posed. I think that he's up there with the most aesthetic physiques of all time across any division, since he knew how to position his body to highlight the best aspects of his physique. Next is one of the more influential competitors when it comes to technicalities, being Rich Gaspari. He ushered in a new level of condition standards to the stage, coming in absolutely peeled and shredded, which allowed him to battle it out with the best of the decade, Lee Haney. Haney is obviously the choice for this first place spot, since he won 8 Olympia titles from 84 to 91, and encapsulated the saying, mass with class. He had near-perfect proportions, great aesthetics for a more massive competitor, and really set new benchmarks for the sport. The 80s may not seem too exciting at first glance, however, the general increase of condition and mass while retaining clean lines is something that I really enjoy about this decade. The 90s were a pivotal era in bodybuilding since after Lee Haney retired at his all-time best in 1991, the throne was up for grabs for the first time in 8 years. This decade might be the most competitive, genetically diverse, and impressive out of any in history thus far, with the top 3 being rather subjective in any order. That said, I think that Flex Wheeler has to be mentioned whenever speaking about this decade, since he arguably had the most aesthetically pleasing physique for a mass monster. Although his conditioning left much to be desired later on in his career, he brought the fullness, bubbliness, and 3D shape and really brought it to the next level. Nobody had seen a waist so small with such large arms and legs, and his symmetry was off the charts. Another competitor who battled it out in a similar manner was the legend Kevin Levrone, who brought that 3-dimensional muscle and mass to new heights and was more complete and conditioned than Flex in my opinion. He had some of the most impressive shoulders and arms, a great silhouette and flow, and all-around top-tier genetics. Finally, we get to the most impressive competitor of the 90s, the Shadow Dorian Yates. Dorian easily wins this spot, beating the best, most genetically gifted bodybuilders of all time, like Flex and Kevin, along with Ronnie Coleman, who we will get to later. All these legendary names were barred from winning the coveted title by a hard-working, never-quitting Dorian. Through injuries, sickness, and many other obstacles, Dorian always defied the odds and won the title over and over again, even with his subpar-shaped genetics, making the 90s one of the most interesting and dominant eras of bodybuilding. Alright, the turn of the decade, the 2000s are up next, and this was a very interesting time period as the genetic diversity wasn't nearly as impressive as the 90s, however the competition was nearly just as fierce. While there are a ton of competitors who could take this 3rd place spot, I'd have to go with one of my all-time favorites being Dexter the Blade Jackson. The reason I'm going to go with Dexter and not a guy like Gustavo Bedell, Gunter Schlierkamp, or Marcus Rule isn't because he won the Olympia, but rather because of his incredible consistency. He just kept on getting better and better every year, winning in 2008 and continuing to improve all the way into the 2010s. His physique was never really the largest or the freakiest, however he won so many titles and placed so highly at every Olympia, to where his track record alone should give him this spot. Now, the next 2 places should be pretty obvious, since Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler take 1st and 2nd respectively. These two cultivated the most entertaining rivalry that we've really ever seen, with Ronnie basically shutting Jay's hopes of ever winning every single year. This loop continued to force Jay to improve and make small adjustments every year, and with determination and patience, he eventually won the title in 2006. Ronnie won 8 Olympias and Jay won 4, so you can see that it would be rather hard to have really anyone else in the top 2 for this decade. The 2010s are similar to the previous decade since 1 and 2 are on lock for the most impressive bodybuilder spots. That said, 3rd place is rather flexible since you have plenty of notable competitors who can take this place. Big Ramy immediately comes to my mind, placing well throughout his, career during this decade, you could say. However, I feel as though he still really hadn't come into his own just yet. William Bonac is another competitor who I feel like was pretty great as well. However, his physique didn't necessarily have that wow factor and sting of some other competitors. Cedric McMillan can be mentioned in a similar light as well, since he arguably had one of the most eye-pleasing physiques for a big man during this time. However, his consistency and track record weren't the best, and I don't really feel like they warrant a top 3 spot. In my opinion, this place can either go to Brandon Curry or Sean Roden, since both won the Olympia title once and brought world-class physiques to the stage. Personally, I'd probably go with Sean here, since he ended Phil Heath's reign and brought aesthetics and razor-sharp conditioning back to the stage. I'm a huge fan of his physique, and him being the oldest competitor to win the title is also very inspiring. Like I said earlier, 1 and 2 are on lock, with Phil Heath and Kai Green taking these spots. These two had the most real rivalry, having real hatred and near physical altercations on and off the stage. Now, I have no doubt that these two pushed each other to bring their best renditions to the stage year after year, and at the 2012 and 2014 Olympias, these two could have been interchangeable. Kai definitely had more weaknesses though than Phil, which is why he's 2nd and obviously never won the title. However, he's still considered one of the best of all time. Of course, Phil won the Olympia 7 times, had one of the best physiques ever at the 2011 Olympia, and dominated the stage for 7 consecutive years, creating a legacy that stands toe-to-toe with the best of all time. The final decade, which hasn't even reached its halfway mark, is the 2020s. Since this decade is relatively new, it's hard to say who is the best to ever do it. Who knows, Derek Lunsford may go on to win 6 titles in a row, or Hadi Choopan may be the second ever competitor to win the title back and go on to win again and again. This ranking could definitely be changed and is objectively the most subjective. However, in third place, I'd probably go with a guy like Big Ramy. While he was freakishly large, I feel as though the caliber of competition at the Olympias he won weren't necessarily the best, and I think the physiques that he brought had numerous flaws. Still top 3 as of now, however, there were just too many small things that I personally didn't like with his physique. Next would be Derek Lunsford, who controversially won the 2023 Olympia. While there was a lot of debate surrounding this win, I feel as though his physique is great nonetheless. He has the best back since Phil Heath, incredible shape and aesthetics, and one of the best structures relative to his height. You can hate on his lackluster frontal conditioning or lacking quad sweep on the quads. However, there is no denying that he is a very dangerous competitor to anyone in any lineup. Lastly is probably the People's Champion and my personal favorite bodybuilder so far during this decade, being Hadi Choopan. Hadi is just a complete workhorse, bringing phenomenal, unmatched frontal conditioning, crazy density, tons of size, and just a very impressive physique all around. His 2024 Arnold, Ohio win was easily the most impressive physique of this decade, easily, maybe only being matched in wow factor to Andrew Jacked at the 2023 Texas or Rubio Mosquera at the 2023 Prague. Anyways, that's it for the top 3 bodybuilders of each decade. Let me know in the comments down below what your favorite decade is and the bodybuilders you'd have making up your top 3. And if you enjoyed, a like and sub would be awesome. With that all being said though, I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.